Hey everyone, and welcome to Everything Outbound, episode 3. I'm joined again by Ben Bennett, CEO of Second Voice. Hi, Ben.
How you doing?
Yeah, good. Right, so today we're talking about replies. So we're talking about replies to outbound emailing, outbound approaches to potential customers, and how you handle them. Because this is a topic area that's been really interesting. We've been working on it with a lot of our clients to help them and guide them around this area, and we felt that it was worth doing a video, sort of create something a little bit more broadcastable around the topic area. So I guess first of all, Ben, do you want to set the scene as to why we care about how you reply to outbound email and why it's relevant? Because I think if companies are using a lot of inbound marketing and getting leads coming to them, those individuals are usually in a kind of a buying frame of mind. Whereas when you're doing outbound, it's very different. So let's sort of talk through that.
Yeah, sure. So we want to look at the mindset of the individual when you're knocking on their door. So depending on who your target market is and how you're approaching them will impact the way that somebody's going to engage with you. So we know that B2B best practice is not just email, that you want to be applying LinkedIn and phone and events and a whole bunch of other channels that are supported by email. But if you are running email campaigns, we've got to remember that when somebody is receiving an email, unless we are being really focused and identifying a particular signal or a trigger event that they're new in job or they're publicly talking about having a need, that most people will not be aware that they have a problem. They may not be aware of you or service providers in that category either. So we are part running an awareness campaign. We are part running a campaign to get people's attention. But if you are fortunate enough to be reaching people who are aware that they do have a problem and are actively searching for a solution to said problem, and they may have even identified you or a bunch of your competitors as a specific vendor to that solution, then you're probably only dealing with what is reported to be 3% of your prospective market. So to put that into context, every 100 people you try and reach, only 3 of them will be remotely interested and in a position to explore the category or the solution it is that you're providing. So think about that when you are doing outreach of any kind. We can't just rely on the fact that they're a chief executive or they're a chief marketing officer or they are whatever your ICP is. Just because they are your ICP, ideal customer profile, they are in your sector, they are in your region, they are a certain size and they fit that persona perfectly, that does not mean they are ready to buy. So we really want to make sure that we are catering to all situations of I am problem aware, I'm solution aware, and I'm vendor aware. Great. If we can't validate that before we're doing our outreach, we're starting to use our copy and our outreach as a way to educate them on a situation and capture attention. So they're the things that we should be looking at in terms of the situation your prospect is in.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. I mean, we talk about that 3%. Sometimes you do get a direct hit, right? You do get a response to an outbound that is absolutely, can I have a meeting? But it's rarely that black and white, like a hard no or a hard yes. It's often in that middle ground where there's still opportunity. And that's the big piece. It's saying just because they may have not been problem aware or they might not have been solution or vendor aware, there's still an opportunity once you've made contact. A reply of any sort is a great opportunity for anyone doing outbound.
Yeah.
And I think some of those replies that we see, so I think we can kind of go through some of them because there's some quite common things that we see as we do this that come up again and again. And we try to figure out best practice approaching some of those things. So kind of going through a list. One of the things that we see quite commonly is, look, I'm the wrong person, right? So somebody receiving an email, recognizing that perhaps their company has a need or it's not their decision, so they pass you over to somebody else, or there is at least an appreciation that what you're doing might be relevant to their company, but I'm not the right person. And actually, I think when we do outbound, often one of the techniques we use in signals is to name another individual within that company. So pull the data and be able to use that data to suggest someone else as a way of getting through the door. And so let's say a scenario where you've got through to someone, they've said, look, it's not me, but it's X, and they've given you a name. What would your approach be there?
Well, I think before we go into it, and I absolutely will cover that, it's worth noting that culturally, a lot of people in the UK specifically don't like saying no. They don't like giving you a true reason for not engaging, and there is often a hesitance. So people don't reply with absolute confidence and conviction with either a yes or a no unless they are absolutely sure of what the solution is. And so a lot of people aren't aware of the solution. They feel that they might not have enough information, and so there's a hesitance to expose themselves as not having enough information. So this mid-range answer of "it's not me, it's somebody else" is usually a deflection. And equally, salespeople and anyone doing outbound will also resist the urge to challenge in most instances. So they'll take a response of "I'm the wrong person" or "not right now" as face value. But we really do need to challenge that to give ourselves the opportunity, but also to explore how that conversation could go. So if somebody's come back and said, it isn't me or not right now, and we're assuming this is done on email, the first thing I would be looking to do is, if they've replied, do we have their phone number in their email signature? So we want to collate all the information that we can around that person, and where possible, go for verbal communication. And so pick up the phone and ring them and explore who the correct person is, to see if we might be able to get a warm introduction to the actual person that is going to be the right individual to speak with. If we don't have a telephone number, then we want to reply. Okay, so we want to see if we can find out who the person is. If they do volunteer a name, we're going to want to ask, are you able to make an introduction for me? Just forward this email and copy me in, and then I can pick up the conversation on your behalf. Equally, we want to make sure that we're doing everything with respect. So person A isn't the right person. So person A, please may I use your name when reaching out to the contact that you've given me, in order for me to have a bit more credibility. So we want to be looking for information, we want to be looking for permission, and we want to be looking for a way that when we reach out to the correct person, that we're not just walking into that scenario in a cold outreach. Again, we want to make sure that I've spoken to Kelly over here, and Kelly has asked me to speak to you directly, or we're getting the individual that we first reached out to make that warm introduction. But absolutely, we do not accept their initial answer as a closure of conversation. So it's our job to continue to put our detective hats on and explore opportunity with a different member of the team internally.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that you mentioned picking up the phone and calling, or LinkedIn. And I think what you find is that for some founders, for some salespeople even, that feels difficult. It feels like a step into the unknown. They've just told you via email that they're not the right person, but to pick up the phone and then have a conversation with them. But I think it's absolutely something you must do. As a founder, you're looking at every lever you can to advance your business, to grow your business. And if you've got that phone number available to you, you kind of got to, suck it up and make the call. They get easier, don't they? And the way that you approach it is friendly. You don't just go into sales mode. You recognise that that's not the individual, but you build a relationship and try to get the introduction, get the name of the individual that is responsible. I certainly remember every situation like that, I would LinkedIn them anyway. So LinkedIn, they've replied, make the connection. The great thing about that is then they're receiving in their feed any news that you produce, and you're staying in their mind, and it becomes an awareness piece anyway. So there's no harm to doing it, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree. And when we're picking up the phone, it's not a case of, well, we're now cold and you don't know who I am. This is a really warm situation. So you could literally just phone them and be like, hi, Mike, look, you just responded to my email. Thanks for taking the time to do that. Rather than me put any more information in your inbox, I just wanted to have a quick couple of minutes, find out who that person is, better understand what their role is, get their email address, and then I can leave you to your day, rather than continue the back and forth on email. And actually, most people on the receiving end of that will probably appreciate the fact that they can get the conversation out of the way in 30 seconds, as opposed to then have a back and forth on email, or worse still, they ignore you. Because as soon as they ignore you on your email only reply, the door's shut. You've then got to go to that other person cold. So yeah, I do agree that phone angle and building your network on LinkedIn is a perfect thing to do when you've received any response on email.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a really good line, that I don't want to clog up your inbox. That's the reason for it being a call rather than an email, which is your justification for picking up the phone.
Yeah.
A lot of people are scared of the phone these days, but if you've got that opening line, it just makes the rest of the conversation that much easier. Let's talk about another situation, really common one. I think this is a lead where they've said, "Hey, look, I'm interested, but not right now. Let's review in 6 months' time." For me, that's pretty warm. That's definitely identified that there is a problem, and they've just adjusted the timeline. So what's the technique there? Do you wait 5 months, put a note in HubSpot and say, "Okay, I'll call you in 5 months," or do you do something different?
Well, you absolutely can. And I think the thing here is to be authentic and sympathetic to their situation. But we still do not have enough information to validate whether this is somebody kicking the cold outreach into the long grass, hoping that it disappears. And by the time we get through the next few months, I would have forgotten about you and salesperson is gone. And it comes back to um, a prospective contact either not being comfortable with the situation, not understanding the situation, being in what is called a system one bias, where they're being sold to, and therefore I'm not open to any form of consideration around a vendor or a solution because I'm being sold to, and therefore I'm gonna push you away. So the not right now, our job as salespeople is then to determine, is not right now legitimate, or is it an excuse to get me out of their inbox, off of the phone, and remove them from a prospect list? So in order to do that, we really want to try and better understand why the timelines are not right now. So if they say, call me in the new year, we want to be coming back to try and understand, what's so important in the new year. Is there a specific time event? Is it budget reviews? Do your existing vendors, do their contracts renew at that point in time? So is it a legitimate reason that they will be moving that timeline further away because that might be when they're reassessing the situation and understanding the problem, or is it an excuse? Now, as we move towards the season at the end of the year where things are going to be busy at Christmas, we're just trying to get our work done. We're not buying anything right now. The not right now is a great opportunity to better understand what the workload is now, what they're focusing on, what the problems they might be facing, and hopefully you can solve that. But if you can't, then move to a point of, okay, it's going to be January. Let's look at building up either a wait list or fill the diary for January, so that we can further engage. Now, as a salesperson, regardless of your experience in sales, the default reaction, because it's courteous, is to say, not right now, I've heard you, no problem, I'll give you a call in a few months.
Mm-hmm.
But basically what you're then doing is letting someone go. You're losing control of the timeline, you're losing a prospective customer, and if you are at least getting some dates in the diary further down the line, brilliant. But we're remembering what we're dealing with here is an email response of not right now. And you mentioned it there, Mike, right? So they might be aware that it is a situation that they're seeing. They're validating that they're an ideal customer. But as soon as you let them go, and we're not trying to be overbearing as salespeople here, but as soon as they're gone, to re-engage them is going to be twice, 3 times as hard. So let's try and get a date in the diary. Let's try and book in a conversation. And as we said before, if their phone number's on their email signature, pick up the phone or do something on LinkedIn to make sure that we can head that off outside of a written format on email.
Yeah, that's the golden rule across all of these responses. If you can see the phone or if you can find the phone number, even mixing the media up and swapping between email, going to phone and LinkedIn just creates more channels of communication with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other ones you get are, I guess, a bit more like objections. So they certainly feel more like no's, but they're always opportunities. So I think one of the ones you see, certainly in a competitive market, is I'm already using X, or I'm already using one of your competitors, or I have already solved that problem, and I'm using a competitor. And sometimes they name them, sometimes they don't. Um, so is that a situation? Well, okay, they've already got a vendor. I should focus my attention elsewhere and not bother with them.
Yeah, maybe. But again, it comes down to us to qualify. And I think the qualification piece is the area that founders, salespeople leave on the table. And again, it comes back to taking a response at face value. Probably a conversation for another session, but Daniel Kahneman talks about system one and system two mindsets, and the system one mindset is bias. It's learned behavior. It's there to protect. And when we're getting these responses of "I've got a competitor," that might be an excuse to get us off the phone, or we use a competitor. Legitimate response. So it's our job to establish what is that situation. If we take it at face value, then we miss out on understanding who is the competitor. Why did they choose to work with that competitor? What's working well for them? Are they getting good return on investment? How many people are using it? How often are they using it? What is the user retention? There's a whole bunch of stuff that we can find out that's going to arm us with information that if we do need to call them or get back in touch at a renewal date because it's a genuine objection, we've got that information and insight about how they're engaging with that particular supplier. So we really, again, put your detective hat on, get curious and try and understand the situation. And typically what we would do as a sales organization reaching out to people is to better understand what works well for them. So it's really easy to say, you're using a competitor or there's an alternative solution in place. Okay, I now want to badmouth them because we are a competitor and we want to say how great we are compared to their competitors. But you don't have them as a client and your competitor does. So give your competitor some credit. They've been bought for a reason. So what do you love about them? What works? Why did you engage? And then when you're going through the positive, if you are able to get into a conversation to find out more, we can look at, well, what are some of the areas perhaps where you hoped it did something, but it doesn't, or you're finding it to be less effective than what you'd hoped when you purchased it. Get that insight. But ultimately, we want to maintain a conversation. We want to get insight and we want to keep control of that timeline. So if we can understand that they're opening to speaking to us again at the point of renewal, what is the review date? Let's keep in touch. And then during that period of time, we nurture. We nurture by giving away information that's going to help them overcome perhaps some of the weaknesses of that competitor. Here's some information. Here's some data. Here's some insight. Here's a blog we wrote. Here's something that I want to help you with. And we ask for nothing in return, but we just be there as a critical friend and as a value add until that point in time where it is a legitimate reason to reach back out to consider us as an alternative vendor in that situation.
Yeah, and I think putting my marketing hat back on, getting that information into the database, into the CRM, marketers need that, right? We want to know which competitors are being used, and so that if you're running campaigns specifically on those competitors, you've got the data ready, and the dates that contracts are up, so important for sales teams just to be able to plan, as you say, nurturing process, but also a ramping up of that process if that due date is coming round.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and then I guess the other objection you get, I guess it's kind of similar in that it's not that we're using competitor, but even kind of a lack of recognition that they have that problem. So you've done your research, you've figured out how your product can solve a certain problem, you've written that perfect outbound, you've absolutely scored in on the data to the right person. You think, I'm reaching out to this person, I think you've got this problem, here's how we have a solution, and they turn around and go, I don't have that problem, right? That's not a concern to me. How do you deal with that? That feels like a very direct. Have you done your information? Have you done your research wrong? Have you got something wrong, or is there a way of handling that one better?
Yeah, and all of this comes back to let's try and get verbal conversation and let's understand what mindset they're in. So again, Daniel Kahneman, system one, system two, If you want to go and read about that, the book is called Thinking Fast and Slow. But again, it talks about this protective bias. So the prospectors come back to say they've got no need for the solution. Two situations here. They either do and don't want to tell you about it, or they don't. If they do have the situation and don't want to tell you about it, they're probably because they don't know how to solve it. They don't want to confess that they've got a problem. You're still a stranger. Why would they open up and give you intricate details around what it is that they're suffering with or struggling with? So we need to then move into a position of education and support and validation. And so we ultimately can then start talking about case studies or scenarios around maybe copycat businesses or lookalike businesses, for want of a better phrase. So somebody like you, Mr. or Mrs. Prospect, that is in the same job, same organization, same sector, they too felt that they didn't have the problem. And when they uncovered that they could better improve this statistic or this outcome, we showed them how it was possible. And then we talk about how different outcomes were achieved. We could do this by testimonial case study, using your own customer's voice to help them hear from their peers. And I think it does come back to an educational position of, look, we're not here to catch you out. We're here to educate and support. And as salespeople, we should be doing that. This is around education and support and facilitation, not a let me catch you out and then sell you my wares because I've caught you in a vulnerable position. So we need to be consultants. So do they recognize the problem? Are they in a position of a hard objection, a hard no? And actually, where do you spend your time? So when we're working with our teams internally, I talk about an archery target. So there's the bullseye, a center ring, and then an outer ring. The bullseyes are the ones that you alluded to earlier, Mike. Yeah, this is the 3%ers. I see that problem. I am interested in finding out more. Let's have a call. Great. You land them every single time. That central ring just outside the bullseye, these are the ones that are perhaps aware, perhaps researching. They're not immediately enthusiastic about talking to you, but you are an option, and we can move them into the enthusiastic, engaged stage by sharing knowledge, by case studies, tactics that might help, by educating and enabling them, giving away information free of charge to support them through their journey, and we could bring them into that 3%. The ones that sit on that outer ring that are hard resisting, these are the ones that are coming to the table in that system one mindset. And we've got, a very, very low chance of being able to win hearts and minds unless we're very persistent in able to build rapport and support. So typically when we're talking about spending our time, if these individuals are heavily resistant, ask if we can put them into a mailing list, ask if we can continue to share information that's going to be useful for them, and then put them into marketing and nurture. Equally, we want to understand that, are they resisting and saying no because they're not the right people? They're not the ones with the purse strings. They're not the ones with the immediate problem. And then again, understanding how that hierarchical situation sits within their organization. But this knowledge is power. Get all the information we can, kill with kindness, share all the information you can to make their lives easier. And over time, they will move into that area of that middle section of the archery target where, do you know what, maybe I do have a problem, or maybe I should consider a solution. So it's all about giving. But, this all comes back to don't just walk away from your first objection, and really try and understand where that objection came from, why you've received it, and then what you can do to overcome that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That there might be problem unaware, but that doesn't mean that they might not be aware in a year's time. It's a lot of innovative products, a lot of the technologies that we're working with, and the startups that we're working with, where they are bringing something new to the market. Often that's the challenge they face. That it's not a direct copy of a competitive product which is already in place, but it's something completely new. And so you're actually having to educate them that there is a problem there in the first place. And so naturally that forms part of that journey. And in a year's time, 2 years' time, if you've managed that relationship well, those are the customers that will be coming back and will be in the bullseye at that point. And you take that longer term view. And certainly as a founder of a company or a business owner, you can do that because you're going to be in that business in 2, 3, 4 years' time. But you need to encourage your sales team, your SDRs, to have that same mindset rather than, well, this isn't going to hit my quarterly target, so I'm not going to bother. I'm going to leave it because who knows whether I'm still going to be here in 18 months. You've got to create that mindset that this is a long-term game, working with SDRs, working with marketing to kind of build those relationships, perhaps slowly, and outbound being part of that process and the responses we get being part of that process rather than just an individual effort to get meetings through the door and not thinking longer term.
Yeah, absolutely. And we could look at what outbound actually needs to achieve, and it isn't always a meeting. If you're running at meetings, you'll probably get some. But really, what we want is we want to be building awareness, we want to be building relationships, we want to be growing an audience, we want to be applying a whole host of tactics to our outbound approach, not just the idea of let's win a new client. Now, winning new clients is a really compulsory area of the sales function, but outbound as a broad brush approach is around, let's get internal referrals to the right people and build warmer relationships to appropriate connections. It's about, if it's not you, it's and this organization right now, then who of your network or peer group might be problem aware, solution aware, vendor aware, and can you make an introduction to me to a different organization? Yeah, get the meeting. That's also an outcome. But ultimately, if we're learning something as an organization, we need to say, well, we're coming to market with something. And every day we're doing outbound, but that's also an opportunity to learn by being at the coalface to say, do our market even want this thing? Are the problems that we're solving even as apparent as we thought they were 18 months ago? So it's insight gathering as well as relationship building, as well as meeting booking. So I think when you put on that hat around research and exploratory conversations, it reduces the fear of the phone because actually it's more of an audit rather than a sales process. But equally, we are learning, we are building network, we are growing audience, and then we're adding more value as we go, as opposed to self-serving, which is get the meeting, move them into a pipeline, close the deal. So I think, look at these responses as an opportunity to put that prospect in one of these categories, not just the I need to sell to you category.
Good. Okay, that's really interesting. I think we'll draw a line there. Great talking to you again. Hope this is
Pleasure.
useful for our existing clients, prospective clients, and anybody out there that picks this up. I think it's really valuable conversation. So the key message, if you can get the phone number, do pick up the phone. It's always the best way. Don't be fearful of it. And we'll leave it there. So thanks for joining us and see you in the next one.